KILT FM HD2 Houston. Insider access, exclusive content. Sports Radio 610. The Texans play here. An Odyssey sports station.
Sports Radio 610 presents Payne and Pendergast.
All right, six-pack of Texans to watch for tonight. Six guys I can't wait to see tonight. And there could be like 20, honestly. I'm excited for this game.
I wish we had a sounder with a little can opening.
I thought about that during the break.
I don't want to waste 6 cans of beer that I can't justify drinking all 6 of those at this hour of the morning when we've got a pregame show to do later. So, yeah, we'll do.
And some of these beers I'm about to lay out here might be skunk beers for some people. I may be more interested in some of these guys than the average fan.
The one of these, it's not a skunk beer, but it's not like 4-year-old Milwaukee's Best Light.
Right.
But, yeah, yeah.
This is not a skunk beer right here. This, to me, this is the number one player I'm anxious to see tonight, and it's not even close for me. It's Dameon Pierce. Mm-hmm. Dameon Pierce will presumably start at running back tonight. Joe Mixon has not practiced since July the 19th. So we're 3 weeks from Joe Mixon even putting pads on. So Dameon Pierce is going to start tonight. He didn't play in the Hall of Fame game. Thus, this is the first look we're getting at Dameon Pierce, hopefully version, as you point out, Seth, version 3.0. 1.0 was a good version. That was his rookie year. He ran for almost 1,000 yards. Version 2.0 was, what was it, Windows Vista?
Whichever the
New
worst
Coke?
Windows was.
Yeah,
it was
funny.
Windows Vista. It was New Coke. It was a highly anticipated yet deeply disappointing.
Yeah, like, I'll just go back to counting by hand. I don't need this computer anymore. So supposedly we've got the bug fixed. Supposedly there's been a software patch that has been uploaded to Dameon Pierce.
Yes,
and we see if it works.
This is kind of. I don't know if I should use the analogy I just thought of or not. Dameon Pierce, I'm excited to see, and yet I don't want to see it for too long. I would be it's kind of like here, maybe finding out about your girlfriend's relationship history. Oh, it might be a little part of it. You're like, she did some crazy thing in college once,
right?
But I don't want to know too much about it.
Fingers in ears. Yeah.
That's exciting, except wait, no, please don't tell me it happened 29 times on one weekend or something. Like, just so I want to see a little bit of Dameon Pierce.
Right.
I want to see a little bit of Dameon Pierce, just enough to scintillate me and excite me, and then I want to put it away.
Yep.
So I want to see 3 carries. I want 3 carries for 30 yards. But one of those is a 20-yard carry.
Okay.
That's what I'm good. That's all I'm asking for.
That's
all
bad.
I'm asking for is 10 yards per carry for 3 carries.
I said this yesterday. I did this similar segment on the Utopia podcast yesterday. And my thought on Dameon, Seth, is that I don't like the box score doesn't really matter much to me. Let's say he gets 5 touches in this game, right? He's in for 2 series. He carries 5 times. If he were to go 5 carries, 41 yards, I'd be incredibly excited. No doubt about it. Right? Yeah, no. But if he goes 5 carries for 18 yards, but he's putting a foot in the ground, finding a hole, and the reason it's not going for more is just it's not being, he's getting smothered. It's not being completely blocked well. To me, my point is, to me, it's more about how Dameon Pierce looks like as a running back in this system than it is him having to look like the old Dameon, but they happen to block it well, and he runs over a few guys.
I'll go. You know what? Yesterday I went back and watched in my film work, I went back and I watched the Texans versus the Raiders in 2006, and this is why. Landry would accuse me of wanting to go back and watch myself. I didn't play in that game, so I was injured. But I wanted to watch D'Amico Ryans because Kay Adams had brought that game up as one of D'Amico Ryans' best games. One of the most impressive plays D'Amico made in that play was actually on a goal line stand where the Raiders scored, but D'Amico, in filling his hole, in his gap, he waylaid the Steelers' right tackle, like embarrassed the hell out of him, like came up and stood him up and rocked the dude backwards. And so that was enough. That was the first play in the game where I was like, oh yeah, I remember what D'Amico Ryans was like as a football player. I just need to see 1 or 2 plays like that out of Dameon Pierce where it doesn't have to be jaw-droppingly impressive statistically or anything, but like, man, he's got that old oomph back.
Yeah, like Cam Akers' game in the Hall of Fame game, I think is a good example of what I'm talking about. You look at Cam Akers, you look at Cam Akers' box score, and he had 7 touches for 31 yards, including a couple catches. Nothing earth-shattering. But if you watch the game, you see 3 or 4 runs in there where it's like, oh, okay, man, he did his job. He looks good. Look at that spin move, that kind of thing.
All I need is a couple instances of him on a zone running play where he just sticks his foot in the ground and gets vertical.
Exactly.
And then breaks a tackle or hits somebody. And I'm like, okay, does he feel the flow of the offense?
That's it.
And first and foremost, of course, attached to that is I want to see that the run blocking looks good.
Correct.
It gives him that clear picture.
Yep. Number 2, John Metchie. Here's John Metchie earlier in camp on his expectations for training camp.
I didn't really have crazy expectations, honestly. Like, my expectations aren't bigger than the day. And that's something I started practicing, like, towards the end of last season, and it carried on through the off seasons. Like, my expectations don't go farther than next week. My expectations are all today to make sure I'm checking off everything on my process every day.
So as I peek ahead at this game, Seth, I'm guessing Metchie is going to play quite a bit in this game, considering he played a decent amount in the Hall of Fame game.
Yeah.
Considering that he's reportedly not had great practices this week, he was really a non-factor in the Hall of Fame game.
A lot of drops.
A lot of drops.
Throughout camp, we've seen a lot of drops.
Yep. And Metchie is playing at a position where there are other guys who are performing at a fairly high level, competing for wide receiver 5 and 6 right now.
Metchie's a really complicated one, too, because I don't know how the team is evaluating him. Like, do you look at him almost like a rookie in that, man, these last 2 years he's been physically taxed. Even last season, even though he played, he finished his cancer treatment and rolled right into training camp, basically. So I think he's shown a lot of promise and a lot of potential, and I think athletically he has changed. He just hasn't translated it into scrimmage and game situations yet. Like, in that game last week, he didn't look like he was moving the same way we've seen him move in practice, and sometimes it takes a guy a while to just really, truly get integrated into the offense, but he's already been in this offense for a year. So I think right now, unless he really flashes over these next couple games, they're going to have a tough decision to make with him, and maybe they hope that they can keep him on practice squad without him getting picked up by somebody else, or maybe some other team looks at his upside, given everything that we talked about with his recent history, that another team that doesn't have as packed a wide receiver room is willing to trade a late-round pick for him.
That was my prediction yesterday with Metchie, and that's what I would do if Metchie doesn't get to a level that he was forecasted to be when they used a second-round pick on him. If he doesn't get to that point at some point in camp, then I think you trade him, because I think someone would pick him up in a second just based on upside. Like, in a heart, if he gets cut, he's getting picked up by somebody. If nothing else, the Panthers will pick him up to repair him with Bryce Young because they played together back at Alabama, So,
poor Metchie.
Well, got to play well, man.
I would love it if Metchie all of a sudden showed up in Carolina and demanded a new deal or something, even though it's not even allowable by the CBA. And just I've watched. This is not the Bryce Young I knew at Alabama. This is different. Yeah,
pulls a Garrett Crochet on him. I'm not playing in any playoff games if you don't give me a new contract. Yeah. We're Carolina. We're not going to the playoffs. What are you talking about?
So that's why I think most Texans fans are very much emotionally pulling for John Metchie. He's just in a tough spot right now.
Big time. It's a deep position. Yeah. So Dameon Pierce, John Metchie, 2 guys I'm looking to watch. Davis Mills is number 3 for me. C.J. Stroud's going to start this game. But Davis Mills had a very solid Hall of Fame game. Here was Davis Mills earlier this week on his takeaways from his performance in the Hall of Fame game.
I think the big thing was just going out and executing what we've been doing all camp. I thought a lot of guys were ready for the moment. Obviously, we've put a lot of work in throughout OTAs and through the start of camp so far, and our whole goal was just go out there and play clean and move the ball down the field, and I think we did that.
He's a super intriguing player to me, Seth, just because of how he was handled last year. He was on the depth chart, the backup all year long, and yet clearly the team didn't have the level of trust in him to start a late season game on the road at Tennessee. And yet I feel like he's the second string guy again this year. He started the Hall of Fame game. He had I thought a really good game. You were not as bullish on his game at first blush as you were after you rewatched it.
Yeah. I wasn't at first, and then I went back and watched a third time.
Yeah.
I watched it on the quick rewatch. I was a little too. I was guilty of confirmation bias. I was kind of really focusing in on the negatives that I saw in some of the questionable decisions. I went back and when I watched more thoroughly, like, all right, man, he was executing the offense. There were a couple moments where I think he might have second-guessed himself a couple times, but one time he worked through it.
Yeah.
Another time he didn't. But I'm almost I was the third time I went through and watched, I was very pleased with the positives. Just in that, hey, can he execute the offense? Yes, I think he can. And then also, when you've got a backup quarterback, he's not super athletic, but he can. This isn't even like a white guy thing. He can run better than you think he can. Mm-hmm. He's just, that he's athletic and he's big, but that matters with your backup quarterback because teams aren't necessarily ready for that.
Yep. So Davis Mills, can he build on his performance last week is a big one for me tonight. Can he build to the point where, hey, maybe Nick Casario's phone rings about Davis Mills? You know what I mean? Like, it's right.
There's at least a third of the league right now is running a Kyle Shanahan offense.
Yeah.
And when your starting quarterback goes down or Matt Stafford finally catches the age bug or something like that, it can get tempting to bring in a guy who just knows the system. Like Bill O'Brien did it with Brian. Bill O'Brien got rid of Ryan Fitzpatrick for Brian Hoyer.
Right.
And then replaced Brian Hoyer with Ryan Mallett at one point just because those guys knew the system.
Yeah.
That's how extreme it is. And for a guy who genuinely can execute an actual system, because the Bill O'Brien system was like, let's just try to create the next Tom Brady.
Right.
Right. That it actually makes a lot of sense for some team to potentially want Davis Mills.
Yeah, Mills playing well tonight would behoove the Texans. It would behoove Mills, but it would certainly be great for the Texans on many, many levels. Number 4. So we got Pierce 1, Metchie 2, Mills 3. Number 4, Kenyon Green, who did some good things in the Hall of Fame game, who obviously has changed his body completely from before having all those surgeries this past offseason. Here was Titus Howard, who Kenyon Green teammate on the offensive line, on the growth he sees in Kenyon Green.
Growth, man. Maturity. Kenyon's matured a lot. He's put in a lot of work. His body is in the best position he's been in. His mind is in the best position he's been in. He's very confident. In his ability, and he's putting it all together, man. He's been out here putting some good stuff on the field for these first couple of days of camp, and I'm excited to see him grow. Like I told him, I've been in the same position he's in right now. You just got to keep working, man. Just keep grinding. He's gonna get better, and I feel like it's gonna be a good year for him.
Kenyon Green, without even any health concerns, was always going to be a guy that I thought would be a bit of a project because he was a big, strong mauler in college. And it's impressive to be a mauler in the SEC, don't get me wrong. But those guys, when maulers get to the NFL, they got to learn how to use technique and they got to learn how to use their feet. And I thought he showed some signs of that in his rookie year. He had some promising positives in his rookie year, even as he was battling through injuries. And even as he faced a gauntlet he faced maybe 6 of the best 10 defensive tackles in the league that year as he was fighting through injury and everything else developmentally. So this year, I have definitely seen a different version of him. I've seen a guy that, man, he's really, I think, he just honed all of his innate athleticism, and he's just moving differently. I think technically he's improved. And in the Hall of Fame game, there was some really good positives, especially him getting to the second level, working on linebackers and moving well in space, all that type of stuff. And now it's just a matter of, all right, you're going to be doing it versus the Steelers are starting 2 of their interior defensive linemen. So he and Juice Scruggs will face the starting interior defensive linemen, at least a couple of them for the Steelers.
Yeah, it's good to see.
Can they look like they did last week, but versus better players this week?
That would be huge. I mean, that's near the top of my list of things that if I had 3 wishes for this game, the interior of the offensive line looking as capable as they did last week, looking that way tonight would be really, really good. My last 2 in my 6-pack are really just curiosities of my own for 2 very different, for 2 kind of different reasons than most Texan fans might be looking at these guys. Henry To'oTo'o is number 5 for me for a couple of reasons. One, Christian Harris hasn't gotten on the field yet. So until further notice, Henry To'oTo'o is going to, if they had to play a game tomorrow, he'd be starting at linebacker for this team probably. And the reason I know that, Seth, is because for some reason Henry To'oTo'o didn't have to dress for the game last week, the Hall of Fame game.
Right.
That's a curious thing to me that he's thought of presumably on that level.
I assumed that it was either an injury or that he was going to get in the fourth quarter or something. It wasn't until I talked to John Harris that I even considered that he's that bona fide a starter right now, that they didn't play him in that game. That honestly, it really surprised me a little bit. I would say, like, Henry To'oTo'o is the consummate guy that needs to be really, really good at all of the technical and football IQ side things of being a linebacker, because he's not as athletic as the other guys that are out there. Like, it's glaring the difference in athleticism between him and the other linebackers out there. Even, Jamal Hill, the rookie, who's not ready for NFL action yet. But it's hard to evaluate linebackers from field level. It's really hard from field level during practice, because you can't see what they're seeing and everything. So they seem to like what he's shown during training camp so far. Without getting too technical about this, it's one thing if they want him to start at Sam linebacker. For him to start at will linebacker, where you're really that's your best athlete amongst your linebackers in a 4-3 a lot of times, I'm very skeptical of that. So we'll see. We'll see exactly what it looks like tonight.
Yeah, I just want to watch plays and go, oh, now I see why he got the starter's treatment last week. That would be nice to see,
Yeah.
Maybe they're seeing a different To'oTo'o in training camp. The last one, and this actually does circle back to John Harris and his appearance with us yesterday, is I'm using Khalil Davis here specifically because of something Johnny said about him yesterday, but really, if I were to make this a position group thing, I am intrigued to see the interior, the defensive line, just because I think they've been better than what people expected in camp. But big picture, interior O-line and interior D-line are the two position groups I'm most anxious to watch go against somebody else other than each other. Khalil Davis, I'm interested to watch. And Khalil Davis was on this team last year, so we saw plenty of number 94 last year, and each game would have a flash play. But Johnny is talking about Khalil Davis like he was talking about him yesterday, like he's Warren Sapp wrecking shop out there in camp.
There's this curious kind of counterintuitive element to D'Amico's defense where it is more aggressive. You do unleash the defensive lineman. It's simplified in a lot of ways for the defensive lineman. It's one of the reasons I love this is why I love D'Amico Ryans so much. D'Amico Ryans knows defensive linemen and knows how to get the most out of them. But as simplified as it is, it's still hard to really embrace it and put it into your muscle memory and to play the way you're supposed to play as a defensive lineman in this system. And sometimes it takes a little while for it to click. And I think, with Khalil Davis, maybe we see a different level of him. The other defensive tackle that I'm kind of excited to watch develop over the course of the preseason is Marcus Harris, the 7th-round draft pick. Because there's something there. He gets across the line of scrimmage very, very fast. He's kind of raw from a skills standpoint in a lot of ways, but there's something there, and I could totally see them looking at him as a guy that, okay, because of his size and because he's raw, we can't use him as an every down starter now, but there's something for him. So he had some bad snaps last week, but he also had some really good flashes. He penetrated really well a few times, so I'm excited to watch him for the next few years.
Number 59, if you want to follow along with Seth and watching Marcus Harris tonight.
He's like a squatty Whitney Merciless.
Yes, yeah. If Hollywood did a really poor job of casting Whitney Merciless or D'Amico Ryans, it would look like Marcus Harris. Yes,
not dumpy. He's very solid and lean, but he's not built like Whitney Merciless.
Just way bigger. Yeah. So or stockier. Text in 713-572-4610. I'm curious what the audience is looking for tonight. Who are the guys? We just rattled off 6 of them right there. Who are the guys and why that you're looking forward to seeing in tonight's game? We'll read them.
Khalil Davis is kind of a cult favorite for a lot of Texans fans.
Yes, he is.
I feel like there's a lot of Texans fans that feel he was one of the more underappreciated players last year.
Yeah, underdog story, man. Didn't he play on one of those alternative leagues, like USFL or XFL or something like that? I thought he did. Maybe I got
in the WNBA.
He did? Okay. Oh, yeah, I remember him.
It was an unheralded story. Got really big. Got too political.
It did. Very polarizing.